She was 19 years old. She was a virgin and was sold to one billionaire sheikh, 75 years old. On the wedding night, he wanted only one thing, to legalize the marriage. But what happened in that bed shocked the whole world. Before we start, write in the comments where you're watching from. Subscribe to the channel, turn on the bell, and give a like, because this story is impossible to forget. Now take a deep breath, because what comes next will break your heart. She was only 19. And that day she heard from her mother a phrase that changed everything. "This is the only way to save the winery." She thought it was a joke, but her father's eyes left no doubt. The proposal was real, official, and had a price that no daughter should ever have to pay. The 75-year-old billionaire sheikh was ready to pay off all the family's debts in exchange for a young wife. Not an actress, not a model, but a well-brought-up, modest woman from a traditional European family. "He wants someone like you," the lawyer said, pushing the contract across the table. On paper, it all looked very beautiful. Gold seals, official stamps, clauses in French and Arabic languages. But nothing about it seemed fair, because what was there, even without words, she understood right away. They were trading her for money, for the winery, for the family's survival, for days. She resisted, screamed, cried, threatened to run away, but everything was already decided. "It's a symbolic marriage," her father insisted. "He's an old man. He probably just needs company." She believed him, wanted to believe. The agreement was signed by international lawyers. A representative from Morocco acted as intermediary. The family received financial protection immediately. Debts were frozen, the winery was taken off auction, and she lost her freedom. The flight to Marrakesh was scheduled for the following Saturday. She left alone on a quiet plane, not knowing if they were taking her to a new life or to her end. The fear didn't come from sounds, but from the silence. The silence of the contract, the silence of her parents, and the silence she carried in her heart. The silence of someone who had already said yes, but never wanted to say it. When she arrived in Morocco, she was greeted with great fanfare. A black armored car, a silent driver, a luxurious hotel booked just for her. But none of it felt like a gift. It all looked like preparation. In the car, she looked out the window and saw a city full of life, playing children, bright tents, palm trees swaying in the warm wind, and thought, how can the world be so light while I'm marrying a 75-year-old man? The day before the ceremony, already in the Sheikh's palace, she heard from the assistants. "He is very much looking forward to meeting you, madam." Her eyes widened. "A meeting? What do you mean? Isn't the marriage just going to be legalized?" She froze. She had thought the marriage was just a formality, but no one had guaranteed that. Neither her father, nor the lawyers, nor the contract. That night, alone in the room, she realized, maybe I will have to lie with him, and no one will come to save me. In the morning, on the wedding day, the palace was quiet, but it wasn't the silence of peace, it was the silence of control. She woke up early, without having slept. The assistants entered the room with strained smiles, white dresses in their hands, and sweet words that only heightened the sense of captivity. "Today is your great day, Madame Eva." Great. She wanted to laugh or scream. Getting dressed took almost an hour. Pure silk, a pearl necklace, a light scent behind the neck. When she looked in the mirror, she barely recognized herself. She looked like a bride, but felt like merchandise wrapped up. In the main hall, the ceremony was ready. A few guests, all in impeccable suits, with neutral faces, diplomats, ambassadors, lawyers. No one from her family was there. No one hugged her, no one looked at her as a daughter, as a person. In the center of the hall stood the groom, Tariq ibn Rashid. He was dressed in traditional attire, a dark turban, and exuded confidence, health, and pride. His eyes sparkled when he saw her. And it was tenderness or possession. He was pleased, happy to know that in a few hours he would get what he wanted so badly, a young, virgin Western wife. The previous ones, all older than him, no longer interested him. Tariq wanted freshness, youth, obedience. She swallowed hard. The ceremony officiant made the official introductions in Arabic and French. She responded only when necessary. Signed papers she no longer read, accepted the ring, the blessing, and the title. She was officially his wife. After the ceremony, the sheikh approached, leaned in, and kissed her hand. She remained motionless, didn't blink. "You are Even more beautiful than they promised me, he said, smiling. She felt nauseous. Later, closer to evening, she was led down a narrow corridor. They passed through heavy doors, thick curtains, a quiet inner garden. The servants left her at a golden door. "This is your wing, Madam Ava." "And where is Mr. Tarek?" she asked. "He will come later, as tradition requires." The door closed, and she, alone in that luxurious room, lay on the bed she hadn't chosen, with a heart beating too fast to sleep, thinking only one thing. Will this night really happen? The room was quiet, too big, too cold. The decor was luxurious, but soulless. Golden furniture, heavy drapes, and a huge mirror opposite the bed. Everything seemed designed to impress or intimidate. She sat on the edge of the bed, heart pounding, feet cold, hands trembling on her knees. She wanted to run, but there was nowhere to run anymore. Suddenly the door opened. Two servants entered, heads modestly bowed. Without asking permission, they said, "You need to take a bath and put on the clothes left for this night." She didn't respond or move, but the women already knew what to do. They prepared the bath, left out thin, almost transparent clothes. It wasn't a nightgown, but a symbol of surrender. "Mr. Tarek will come soon," one of them said emotionlessly. "He likes everything to be by tradition." Tradition, that's what they called it. She entered the bath as if going to a sacrifice, washed in silence, put on the light, almost invisible clothes that exposed her legs and accentuated every curve. Returning to the room, she sat on the bed again. There was no sheet to hide her shame, no air to breathe. A few minutes later, he came. The sound of the door handle turning echoed like a muffled shot in the darkness. She instinctively tensed, though she didn't move. Tarek entered slowly. He was dressed in traditional attire. His face was shaved. Too strong a scent of perfume. His eyes fixed on her with hunger. He closed the door behind him and approached the bed like his property. He stopped in front of her, smiled. "You are beautiful." She didn't respond. He tilted his head slightly. His voice was low and sharp. "Take off your clothes." Silence. "Now I want to see what belongs to me." She swallowed. Trembling hands untied the silk. The fabric slipped from her shoulders and fell onto the bed. She stood naked, eyes downcast. "Lie on the bed," he ordered, with legs spread wide, as a wife should be on the first night, "and don't make me repeat." She lay down slowly, turned her face to the wall. Her heart in despair. Tarek watched her silently. His chest rose heavily, eyes gleaming with anticipation. He slowly lay on the bed, the weight of his body pressing the mattress, came closer, and said, "I will tell you exactly what will happen next." She held her breath. "It will hurt, and you won't move, won't tense up, won't scream. You can bite the sheet if needed, but once I start, I won't stop." A quiet tear rolled from the corner of her eye. But she didn't blink. Her face remained turned, but her muscles trembled. Tarek leaned even lower, now speaking in her ear. His voice was filled with desire and dominance. "You will let this happen. Open up without struggle, without resistance. You were made for this and will endure it all completely." Ava responded, but her whole body went cold. Her gaze lost in the ceiling. Her soul was far from here. Tarek positioned himself between her legs, leaned in, pressed his face to her neck, deeply inhaled the scent of her skin, and whispered in a hoarse voice, "Let's hurry. I crave to possess you as soon as possible." But before making any move, he stopped. His breathing faltered, eyes widened, then rolled back, as if extinguished inside. His body tensed for a second, froze, and then collapsed heavy, limp, lifeless, as if something inside him simply switched off. Ava remained motionless. She felt the weight of his body, his head pressing on her shoulder, his hand thrown across her stomach, the warmth of his breath fading. "Tarek!" she whispered almost voicelessly. There was no answer. She tried to push him away, but he was too heavy. She managed to shift his body only a few centimeters. She gasped from the touch, from what was happening, from the horror. "Help!" she screamed, using her last breaths of air. The door burst open. Servants rushed in, screamed. Two guards quickly followed. One sharply pulled the Sheikh's body, the other covered it with a sheet. The room turned into chaos. Doctors were called. The corridor filled with orders in Arabic, quick steps, and tense voices. Ava was taken to another room, still wrapped in a sheet, pale, in shock. She couldn't cry or speak, just felt a cruel emptiness, as if the world had gone out. A few hours later, she learned the truth. Tarek had suffered a severe, irreversible stroke, entered a coma, was connected to machines, didn't respond, and wouldn't return. For the next 3 months, Ava Miller lived in the palace, without the right to leave or contact the outside world, as if she still belonged to him, even when he was unconscious, until one stuffy morning a servant entered and said only, "Mr. Tarek passed away last night." On the table lay an envelope, the will, and the wife he never managed to possess was appointed partial heiress. No one ever mentioned that night, and she never told either, because that night never happened. The funeral was modest, without cameras or speeches. Just a quick ceremony surrounded by guards and silence. They allowed Ava to attend, despite her being the widow and legal wife. The next day, the Sheikh's lawyer came to the palace in a dark suit, with a folder in hand and an impenetrable expression. "The will was opened this morning," he said directly. "And you are in it." Ava didn't even react. She didn't know if it was a prize or a curse. The marriage contract clause was clear. The marriage must be consummated for inheritance rights to take effect. But no one knew exactly what happened that night, and Tarek never spoke. He chose silence. Silence that meant everything or nothing to many. But no one expected what would come next. The secret Sheikh left a personal will directive, guaranteeing her part of the fortune, real estate, stocks, lifetime support, all within Morocco's inheritance law. It was an individual, thought-out, and irrevocable decision. A gift or a trap? Perhaps it was his way to say, "You will bear my name with love or without, with desire or without, and the whole world will know." But for the Sheikh's children, it was an insult. That same day, attacks began, leaks to the press, articles questioning her origins, rumors of witchcraft, seduction, and that she was there only for selfish reasons, as if she deceived a powerful man to seize his fortune. A young Spanish woman who became a millionaire widow in less than 3 months, the headlines wrote. Ava stayed silent, gave no interviews, and didn't appear in public, but that didn't stop her from becoming a target. The Sheikh's family hired lawyers and started a court process to annul the will, claiming he was ill, vulnerable, under influence, that she took advantage of an old and weak man. And mainly, that the marriage consummation clause wasn't fulfilled. "This inheritance is a disgrace," one of the older daughters declared in an interview on a Dubai channel. "This woman stole what belonged to us." But nothing caused more tension than the news that came 2 weeks later. Zahir was returning. The youngest son, graduate of international law from the University of London, absent for more than 5 years. Secretive, smart, and dangerous. "He won't rest until he clears his father's name," they said. Ava heard it on TV, sitting on the couch with closed windows in a world crumbling around her. She knew that what followed wouldn't be just a court process, you see, it would be a personal war. And she was the target. 7 years passed, and Ava Miller disappeared. Not from official documents, but from life. Now she lived in southern Spain, in an old house among the hills of Cadiz, with white walls, heavy curtains, a simple and fenced garden. There she woke up every day at 6 a.m., drank tea, read, walked silently, without parties, without public appearances, without interviews. The inheritance was kept secret. The court closed the case for lack of evidence of manipulation, but her name was never cleared. Some said she was a cold woman, others a smart victim. But no one knew exactly what happened that night. She never spoke about the marriage, the death, or the will. She had a small group of guards, modest, loyal men paid to protect her from everything, the press, the curious, the story itself. She lived as if carrying a ghost, with constantly alert eyes and a weary soul. She spent days not talking to anyone, tending the garden or sitting on the veranda, watching the wind sway the olive trees. She tried to forget, but her body remembered everything, sometimes trembling in the dark. And even after so much time, peace didn't come, because Ava knew stories like hers don't end in silence. They just freeze for a while. And that time was coming to an end. He came quietly. Zahir ibn Rashid, Tariq's legitimate son, a man with a cold gaze, dark eyes, and natural elegance. He was 35 years old. And though desert blood flowed in him, he was a graduate of international law from the University of London. He was reserved, educated, spoke 5 languages, and had watched from afar for 7 years. He didn't appear when his father fell, nor when he died, nor when the will was read. But now something bothered him. The lack of answers. A woman hiding in the depths of Spain, unreachable, untouchable, and rich. Zahir never accepted this story. Old Tariq, who died on his wedding night with a 19-year-old virgin, and she getting part of the fortune, seemed unfair. It was a clear morning when he first entered Cadiz. He rented a black car and drove alone to the road crossing the vineyards. Outside, southern Spain seemed calm, but inside him everything was tense and alert. He wore a white shirt with sleeves rolled up to the elbows, dark suit pants, and simple but expensive watches. There was no smile on his face, only concentration. He parked the car in front of Ava Miller's house. The gates were closed. Surveillance cameras stood on the sides. One guard watched him from afar. Zahir waited with the window open and hand on the wheel. "Can I help?" the guard asked dryly. "I'm here to talk to Madame Ava," Zahir replied with a clean accent and firm tone. "She doesn't accept visitors." "I am Zahir ibn Rashid." The guard swallowed, didn't answer right away, quickly called, and returned. "She won't see you." Zahir just nodded, didn't argue, slowly backed up, as if it was part of the plan. And it was. He knew he wouldn't get to her with a visit. Knew she was protected. Knew that if he wanted answers, he'd have to do it differently. That night, Ava slept poorly. There was something strange in the air, unusual, a vibration at the gates. She felt someone nearby, and it wasn't a journalist. The next day, Zahir checked into a hotel 3 kilometers away, used a fake name, and began watching. He learned where Ava bought bread, when the guard changed shifts, how many times a week she walked in the backyard. And most curiously, she lived alone, absolutely alone. In the hotel room, Zahir recorded everything. Photos, times, details, not out of obsession, but for strategy. He wanted to understand what was with this woman. She seemed unreachable, but with an empty gaze. Seemed confident, but never left the house, seemed guilty. Or was it what he wanted to believe? For the first time, Zahir doubted her face, how she held cups with both hands, how she avoided looking men in the eyes, how she always kept her shoulders tense. There was something that didn't match a greedy woman's behavior. On the 4th day, he saw her in the store. She was distracted, picking apples, almost approached to talk, but stopped. He felt she wasn't just a puzzle, but a minefield. If he made a wrong step, everything would explode. He didn't leave. After the first attempt to talk at the gates, which was rejected, Zahir stayed nearby. Quietly, strategically, he started going to the same places. The same bakery, the same store, the same path she walked in the evenings. She noticed, felt his gaze even when he pretended not to look, but said nothing to the guards, the neighbor, or herself. She knew who he was and why he came. On the 3rd week, Zahir knocked on the house door. He was neat, shaved, impeccable. White shirt with rolled-up sleeves, light gray jacket, tidy shoes. "I didn't come for revenge," he said when the guard tried to stop him. Ava heard from upstairs but didn't come down. I just want to talk, he insisted. 10 minutes without cameras, without accusations. Silence. I just want to know the truth. Silence again. The guard slowly closed the gates. Zahir didn't argue, turned and left, but returned the next day. And again and again. Ava began wondering if he really wanted answers or was just trying to destabilize her. That Saturday afternoon, she was in the garden watering plants. Zahir appeared on the other side of the fence. Beautiful flowers, he said, nodding. She ignored him and continued watering the lavender roots. I just want to understand, he said, and you're the only one who can tell me. Ava turned off the hose, raised her eyes, and looked at him for a few seconds. What exactly do you want to know? She spoke to him for the first time. Zahir slowly approached the fence. Did you have some romance? You and my father? Ava responded. Her face didn't change. No surprise, no anger, only silence. Did you touch him? He continued. Or did he touch you? She turned away and started watering the plants again. Zahir stayed standing, breathing deeply, as if counting to 10 in his head. And the will? Was that your idea? He finally asked. She let go of the hose. Are you done? For now, yes, he replied. But today, yes. He stepped back and left. The next week, he returned. This time he didn't talk to her, just left a basket at the door, fruits, mint tea, and an envelope with a card. I don't want to intimidate you. I want to understand what my father saw in you, Zahir wrote. She didn't respond and didn't return the basket. The following days passed in. Short encounters, a nod from afar, comments about the weather, a longer gaze than needed. And in every movement of Ava, Zahir saw something that confused him even more. She didn't seem cynical, didn't seem cold, she seemed wounded. And that was harder to accept than any accusations. It was accidental. Zahir spent the day handling legal matters in Seville, but his thoughts weren't on papers. He returned to the hotel in the evening, tense and restless. He was tired of how Ava avoided everything. Questions, gazes, explanations. Always firm, always reserved, unreachable. In the hotel corridor, he involuntarily overheard a conversation between the administrator and the maid. She's strange, right? I've never seen that woman laugh. And no wonder, considering what they say she went through, that nothing happened, that the old man died before. You know, that she was never touched. Zahir stopped. The girls noticed. Sorry, sir, we didn't know you were here. Who said that? He asked. The nurse who cared for his body said he was clean, as if nothing happened. Zahir was silent, then just left. The next day, he came to Ava Miller's gates earlier than usual. I need to talk to her, he said to the guard. This time she allowed it. He waited for her in the garden. She sat, covering her legs with a white sheet, holding a cup of tea in her hands. Zahir approached confidently, but his gaze was different, without anger, with something darker. Is it true, he asked directly, that you never had anything with my father? Ava raised the cup without looking away. What difference does it make now? A big one. Then no. Zahir frowned. No, he touched you. You mean the marriage was consummated? Is that what you want to hear? Yes, I want the truth. Ava stood up, calm and firm, approached, and stopped a few steps away. Yes, the marriage was consummated. Is that what you wanted to know? Yes. Zahir looked at her. Do you swear? I swear, Ava said, looking into his eyes, paused for a few seconds, then quietly, reservedly, and defiantly said, Then prove it. Ava froze. Her gaze faltered for a moment. A second, and he saw. Zahir saw fear, doubt, a blush rising up her neck. She wasn't a master of lies. She was a master of silence. "I don't need to prove anything," she finally said. "But I just said it happened. If it happened, it's in the past." Zahir stepped forward. She didn't back away, because if it didn't happen, he whispered, you wouldn't have rights to the inheritance. "No need to remind me. I know exactly what's at stake." "Then why lie?" She sighed deeply, looked at the sky, and said in a tone mixing pain and defense, "Because sometimes telling the truth means protecting no one." He fell silent. Her face was firm, but her eyes broken. And at that moment, Zahir felt what he didn't expect. It wasn't anger, not contempt. It was desire and guilt, because he was starting to want to understand this woman, but also starting to want to touch her. And it burned. In the following days, Ava tried to pretend nothing had changed. She watered plants at the same time, brewed tea at the same temperature, walked on the garden stones as if floating inside herself. But everything in her was more alert, more tense. Zahir didn't appear for 3 days. No baskets with gifts, no notes, no provocations. She should have felt relief, but was restless. At noon on the 4th day, he appeared without warning, dressed in black. The shirt hugged his body tightly, without a jacket, without formality. His eyes seemed deeper, face closed. She saw him from the terrace and slowly came down. "Came to demand more answers?" she asked in the garden. "No, not to bring back doubts." She frowned. Zahir pulled a clipping from an old newspaper from his pocket and showed the headline. Spanish widow inherited Arab sheikh's fortune after mysterious wedding night. "Did you leak this?" he asked. Ava froze. She read the headline as if for the first time, but already knew, had read, reread, and swallowed the dry blood. "Not me," she replied calmly, "because it was beneficial," he insisted. Then the idea of the consummated night kept the will in force. "Not me at the bar," she repeated. "But you benefited, didn't you?" Her silence hurt more than any scream. Zahir stepped forward. She didn't back away. "So everything is clear," he whispered. "You lied and liked it." "I survived," she replied, looking straight into his eyes. "Liked it." He smirked bitterly at the corner of his mouth. It wasn't mockery, but anger at himself. "You're good at this." "At what?" "At saying nothing but driving everyone crazy." She sighed deeply, turned to go back to the house. But he followed her. "Wait." She stopped, didn't look. "Is that all?" he asked. "You survived?" She turned again and met his gaze. "And why are you here? For revenge, justice, or curiosity?" His gaze darkened, words vanished, only body remained. He came too close. His chest almost touched hers. The warmth of his breath felt between them. Ava felt her heart beat faster. "Don't do this," she said quietly. "What?" he asked, but didn't back away. His hands almost touched hers. Almost, but didn't. She held her breath and stepped back. "It's time for you to go." Zahir stayed standing, eyes on her, pulse quickened, desire hidden under the surface. "You don't hate me, Ava." "Maybe I should, but you don't hate." She didn't respond, turned her back, and entered the house. Zahir stayed alone in the garden. The sun began to set, and his body burned from inside. He didn't know what he was looking for, but knew where to find it. His father's old office in the house in Tangier had been closed for many years. No one went there, not even lawyers. But Zahir entered. The air smelled of old leather, waxed wood, and silence. Maps, books in Arabic, stacks of papers. Nothing was in its place, and that's what worried him. After several hours digging through folders, he found in the depths of a drawer with a false bottom contracts for buying the family's winery, signed by shell companies linked to Tariq. It was like a punch to the gut. Tarek bought the winery long before bankruptcy, was a hidden partner, and gradually sabotaged the family business. Withdrew money, destabilized exports, secretly pressured creditors. It wasn't an accident, not bad business. It was deliberate. Zahir understood everything. His father destroyed what she had to save her, then made her ruin the perfect condition for marriage, not out of love, but to possess her. Zahir sat in his father's chair, looking at the documents, and nearby lay a separate folder with photos, copies of letters, and reports on Ava Miller's life before the wedding. At 17 to 18 years old, at wine fairs, at home with family, at university, they watched her. Even before she knew she would be sold, she was already marked. Zahir's blood froze. Ava wasn't greedy. She was a target, carefully chosen. And his father wasn't a sick man who died too soon. He was a predator who knew exactly what he was doing. Returning to the hotel that night, Zahir didn't close his eyes. Ava's face flashed in his thoughts. How she avoided eye contact, stayed silent, restrained, responded sharply. He understood she never lied, never tried to move anyone. She stayed silent to survive, and paid for it every day. The next morning, Zahir asked the last question to one of his father's old lawyers. Why did no one question the marriage consummation? Why did no one dare doubt? Because assuming the Sheikh did not consummate the marriage means calling the deceased impotent and publicly insulting his memory. None of the sons wanted to bear that shame. Not even you. Zahir was silent. So that's it. Ava received the inheritance not because she was recognized as a wife, but because the whole world feared telling the truth. And in the end, she didn't inherit. She bore that burden. Zahir closed his eyes and sighed deeply. The man who swore to protect his father's honor now had to decide whether to protect the memory or free the woman he destroyed. With each day, it became harder for him to look at Ava without feeling that in some way she was everything his father never dared to be, a free person and silently invincible. In the evening, Zahir returned without warning, without guards, without a mask on his face, and she was already waiting for him, as if sensing his steps in the garden before the gate sound. She said nothing, just opened the door and let him in. The silence between them lasted more than a minute, but inside everything screamed. Zahir approached slowly, not invading, not rushing. "Forgive me," finally he said, "for everything." She just felt it. He sighed deeply. "I didn't come to take anything from you." "I know," Ava replied quietly. Zahir stepped forward, slowly raised his hand, and touched her face with his fingertips. Her skin was warm, cheeks pink. He ran his fingers along her jawline, the curve of her chin. Ava didn't pull away. Her eyes were fixed on his. In her gaze was fear, but also desire, tension, and anticipation. Then he gently took her by the nape, and his lips met hers. It was a strong, warm, wet kiss. His tongue entered without invitation, as if knowing exactly where to go. He explored with precision, owned the space. She moaned at his lips. The sound was hoarse, between pain and pleasure. Zahir bit her lower lip hard, then licked it, then repeated. His hands squeezed her waist, hers on his back, on his shoulders, her body arched toward his, as if wanting to lose itself in this touch. It was a kiss of urgency, anger, desire, fear, and hunger. When he pulled back a few millimeters, still, pressing his forehead to hers, both their breaths were ragged. "Ava," he whispered hoarsely. She only said, "Stay in that stuffy room in the light of the setting sun, penetrating through the window cracks." Ava slowly took off her blouse. Hands trembled, without romance. There was no music, only breaths. Zahir watched, as if asking permission with his eyes, but didn't touch yet. She took off her pants, remained in underwear, then removed that too. There was no shame, only surrender. He approached, ran his fingers over her collarbones, the curve of her neck, the center of her chest. He lowered calmly, confidently. His touch was from one who knows, who leads, but waits. When she stepped back a little, he stopped. "Is everything okay?" he asked in a quiet voice. She nodded, but her eyes glistened. This wasn't pleasure yet. This was fear. Zahir gently laid her down, rose between her legs. His body was warm, firm. The pressure of his hips controlled. Breathing grew heavier. Ava held her breath. He looked into her eyes and waited. "I have never been," she began, but her voice faltered. Zahir only whispered, "I know." Then he entered slowly, deeply, and carefully. Ava moaned from pain, closed her eyes, clutched the sheet, but didn't say no and didn't retreat. Her body opened for the first time, not only physically. He stopped, stayed inside without haste. He felt everything. He kissed her neck, chin, lips, bit lightly, then licked, then moaned. The movements were slow at first, then more confident, then strong. It hurt her, but this pain was hers. And for the first time, this pain was chosen. His hand went along her waist, up her back with force, with desire, with hunger pulled her hair. Ava breathed heavily, but not from fear. It was something else. She opened her eyes. Zahir looked at her as if seeing her for the first time. She said, "I am yours." He replied heavily, "No, you are my choice." He continued until her body trembled completely, until she cried without understanding why, until everything inside her screamed, "I am alive!" Silence. The room was still warm, bodies intertwined, breaths gradually slowing. She lay on his chest with closed eyes and for the first time without weight. But the world outside the window didn't sleep. And the next day came news that changed everything. Days passed as if the world beyond the walls didn't exist. The house breathed with them. The room. The garden. Quiet veranda. Ava and Zahir loved each other with restrained, almost daily insistence. It wasn't just desire. It was necessity. He woke up before her, watching her sleeping face. She waited for him in the evening with a hot body and calmer eyes. They spoke little, touched a lot, as if speaking their own language. But beyond this world, everything was observation. Servants whispered as she passed by. Zahir's two brothers began appearing again in the old palace in Andalusia, and gazes followed every step. "They are together," someone whispered. "It's temporary," another said. "She is trying to hold on to what she inherited." They discussed behind doors. Zahir pretended not to hear, but Ava heard everything. Days passed, then weeks. Her body began changing slowly. First morning nausea, then fatigue, and finally delay. She counted the days. Then counted again. Sitting on the bed with hands on her stomach, she tried to accept what she already knew but couldn't yet say aloud. She didn't tell him. Couldn't. Memories of the cursed contract clause, the one no one spoke of anymore but which she never forgot, echoed in her head like a quiet sentence. If pregnant earlier than a year after the husband's death, the heiress loses rights to the inheritance, except when children are officially recognized by the deceased. But Tariq was dead, and Ava was never touched by him. If someone finds out, if someone suspects, if they check, she will lose everything. Not just money, but safety, the right to stay there, her story, and perhaps even Zahir. One hot day, she had slight bleeding. Nothing serious, but enough to make her pale. She locked herself in the bathroom, washed 3 times, then looked in the mirror. She was pregnant, she knew, and it wasn't joyful news, but a sentence with a set term. That night, Zahir hugged her from behind on the veranda. "Are you distant?" he asked quietly. "Just tired," she replied. "From me, from everything." He didn't insist, only hugged tighter. But Ava kept another secret in her stomach. A secret that moved, grew, and when revealed, could destroy everything. The next day, one of the oldest servants, a Moroccan who served Tariq for decades, approached her with a cup of tea and whispered, "If it's a boy, they will never let him inherit peacefully." Ava froze and at that moment realized she was completely alone. Ava tried to keep everything as before, routine, calm, silence, but Zahir watched. She no longer ate in the mornings, and when she did, swallowed slowly, without taste, went to bed earlier, and woke with deeper eyes. The third time she ran from the garden to the bathroom with hand over mouth, he said nothing but noticed. In the evening, when hugging her from behind, something changed. Her stomach wasn't the same anymore, almost unnoticeable, but he knew every curve of her body like a prayer by heart, and there was something new, something growing. Ava began avoiding mirrors, and he stopped asking, until one stuffy morning she stood at the window in a thin nightgown. Zahir saw her from afar and no longer doubted. The fabric hugged her slim body tightly, but in the center was a light bulge, small but clear. Zahir quietly entered the room, eyes burning. He didn't look around, went straight to her. Ava stood at the window with a blanket on her shoulders. She didn't notice him or pretended not to. His voice cut the air. "How long were you going to hide this from me?" She froze. "When were you going to tell me, Ava?" She turned slowly. Pale face, eyes full of tears. "When? After it grows. After it's too late. I was afraid. Afraid of me." He stepped forward. His voice was quiet but firm. "Or afraid to lose the inheritance." She sighed deeply, met his gaze, didn't answer right away. "Both." Zahir closed his eyes, ran a hand through his hair, turned his back, almost left, but stopped, turned slowly. His gaze was no longer just angry, but hurt. "You hid it from me, didn't lie, but stayed silent. And that hurts too." Ava sighed deeply. Her eyes were wet but firm. "I didn't know how to tell you. When I realized, it was already late. I was afraid." "Afraid of what?" "Losing everything, losing you, losing this place, this tiny bit of peace." Zahir watched silently. When he spoke, his voice was quiet, reserved. "I don't doubt this child is mine. What hurts me? Knowing you went through it alone." She slowly approached and pressed her forehead to his chest. "But now I'm not alone." He hugged her, and at that moment, even despite the war beyond the walls, the silence between them seemed like a refuge. Zahir looked at her stomach. The bulge was almost unnoticeable, but there. He gently ran his hands, as if touching something sacred. "They will try to take it from you, from the child, but they won't succeed." Ava closed her eyes, breathed in sync with him, and he was already there. Not as a son, not as an heir, but as a man. From that day, everything accelerated, gazes multiplied, hidden questions turned into open accusations. Half-sisters began appearing without warning. Aunt spoke loudly, as if she were deaf. She became paler, rounder, hiding something. One of the old lawyers approached Zahir. "If this is confirmed, you understand the political weight, right?" Zahir replied only with a gaze that needed no explanations. That same day, he called a meeting. The marble hall was cold, full of echoes. Uncles, cousins, brothers, lawyers, all silent. Zahir entered alone in black, with a firm gaze. "Ava is pregnant. The child is mine, and whoever dares harm her or this child will have to go through me." Silence. "You never accepted her existence. Now you'll have to accept that she stays." He sighed deeply. The weight on his chest turned into resolve. "I inherited my father's name, but not his mistakes." He turned and left. He knew the war had just begun. The house seemed quieter than ever. Zahir returned from the meeting with a firm gaze but tired body. There was nothing more to say to the family. He had said all that was important. Now he needed to say what hadn't been said to her yet. He found Ava sitting on the terrace barefoot, eyes fixed on the gray sky. He approached slowly, sat next to her, not touching. She broke the silence first. You should hate me. Why? For everything. For how it all started. For staying silent so long. Zahir sighed deeply. I hated the world for giving you so little, and hated my father for thinking he could buy you. She turned her face in surprise, but he wasn't there to hurt. I don't want you out of pity, nor for the child, nor for honor. She looked into his eyes. Then why? Zahir smiled slightly. With that rare smile that was only his. Because now I want to choose you. With wealth or without. With name or without. Ava felt a lump in her throat but didn't cry. I'm no longer that girl who came here in fear, she said. Not the widow the world wanted to bury with his name. Neither property nor scandal. I am my own. Zahir watched silently, as if waiting for what next. Ava touched her stomach, then his hand, and still said, I want to be yours. Zahir approached, pressed his forehead to hers, and whispered, Then stay, but only if it's your choice, not mine. Not out of fear. She felt it. Eyes closed. Her heart finally found peace. That night there were no promises, no wedding rings, no solemn words. There were only them, lying, holding hands, and the whole world stayed beyond the walls. And for the first time, Ava didn't feel she had to resist, because now she was where she chose to be. The sun was starting to rise when they arrived in a small village on Spain's southern coast without bodyguards, without witnesses, without family. The house outside was white, with blue windows and a veranda facing the sea. Inside were 2 bedrooms, an open kitchen and a courtyard with lavender. Just that. But for Ava, it was enough. For the first time, it was enough. The wedding took place right in the courtyard. A local judge, invited by Zahir's friend, conducted the ceremony. There was no wedding dress. She was in a light tunic, he in a white shirt and linen pants. It was the simplest wedding they had ever seen. But for Ava, it was the most real wedding she could dream of. When the judge finished the ceremony, Zahir approached quietly. First kissed her forehead with respect, then her lips with tenderness but firmness. Their hands calmly touched. Yes sounded without haste, and eyes said everything that needed no words. The legal process went quietly and slowly. Zahir's family filed a lawsuit to challenge the will, trying to annul the part of the inheritance left to Ava. They used the pregnancy as an argument to cancel the rights preservation clause, which stipulated that if she got pregnant earlier than a year after Tariq's death, she would lose rights to the inheritance. But Ava didn't fight, preferred to renounce. She signed a voluntary document, giving up most of the property linked to Tariq's name. She kept a small plot in southern France that no one wanted to challenge. The family's old winery. The only piece of history she insisted on keeping. And enough to live far away, simply and freely. Zahir took only his own and refused to touch what was hers. We're not here to repeat the past, he said. We're here to do it differently. And they did just that. In the new house, Ava woke early, drank tea on the veranda, felt the cold ceramic under her feet, listened to the sea, and remembered who she was, to never return to that. Zahir made coffee, stroked her stomach before saying a word, then kissed her calmly and sincerely. The child grew in silence, without noise, without pressure, without fear. That night, without haste, he entered the room and found her sitting on the bed. Hair loose, gaze calm, on her lips a quiet smile. She waited for him silently, and when he approached, said, That night that was supposed to be my first was a nightmare. Fear, silence, pain. It wasn't love. There was no surrender. It wasn't me. Zahir sat next to her, took her hands, and replied, Let this be your first, the only one that matters, ours. She nodded, and the kiss came before words, hot, wet, real. His lips found hers as if returning home, with tongue, with desire, with respect. They lay together easily, without rituals, without fear. They made real love, without past, without debts, without shame. When Ava, already breathless, lay on his chest, he ran his hand over her stomach and whispered, "Now you are my wife, the mother of my child, and the love of my life." She smiled with a full, free smile and replied, "Now I am your first by choice." Their story didn't start as a fairy tale, but was woven from new beginnings, scars turned into strength, from silence become refuge, from everything that only love can heal. If this story touched you, give a like, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the bell. Here, in Stories of Love and Romance, we believe that all pain deserves a new beginning, and every new beginning deserves to be told. And now tell in the comments where you're watching this story from. I'll wait for you in the next video. Remember, some stories start with pain but end with saving our lives.